Suu Kyi remained a prisoner for 6 years. Alone in this house on University Avenue, she was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Her whispered name became a byword, and people would pass her house just to be reassured by the sound of her playing her piano. Last year, she was finally released, though today she is still denied freedom of movement. As this film goes to air, her husband, Michael Arris, and their 2 sons in England have again been refused permission to visit her. Early one Saturday morning, David Munro and I went to see her, our cameras concealed from the military intelligence guards who continued to watch her every move.
What were the most difficult times to you personally during your house arrest?
There were times when I was worried for my colleagues, and there were times when I worried for our people out there when they seemed to be undergoing a lot of repression. And I worried about my sons very much because the young one was only 12. And he had to be put into boarding school. So, of course, naturally, I worried about these things.
Yes.
But then I would always remind myself that the families of my colleagues were far worse off, because those of my colleagues who were put in prison in Burma, their families were also insecure.
Were you able to stay in touch with Michael during that time?
Not throughout that time. There were times when we were out of touch.
For how long was there?
I think the longest period was for about 2 years and 4 months or 5 months, something like that.
No letters or anything during that time? No letters from the children got through?
No.
I would try to imagine being you and surrounded by a hostile force, cut off from your family, your colleagues and comrades and friends. Weren't there times when you were actually terrified?
No, because I didn't feel hostile towards them. This is what people don't seem to understand. They say, well, you must have been terrified, but why? I didn't feel hostile towards the guards or the soldiers surrounding me. And I think fear comes out of hostility.
You and your people are at present up against quite uncompromising and brute power. How can you reclaim the democracy that you won at the ballot box with that power confronting you?
I don't think we're the first people who have had to face an uncompromising and brutal power.
But the question is the most difficult one,
in the quest for freedom and basic human rights. I think we depend chiefly on our own people, on the will of our own people for democracy.
But it still comes down to, on one side, there is a power that has all the guns.
But increasingly, I think it is getting more difficult in this world to resolve problems through military means. It is no longer acceptable. I do not think the ASEAN countries themselves would accept a military solution to the problem in Burma. And the fact that the authorities themselves are so keen on attacking us in their papers seem to indicate that they also are not depending on guns alone.
This is the death railway of World War II, carved through the Burmese jungle by the Japanese at the cost of 16,000 Allied lives. One life, it is said, for every sleeper. For the men who built this railway and survived, believing their horror would never happen again, there is a terrible irony here. During last year's 50th anniversary celebrations of victory over the Japanese, I remember the Burmese being mentioned just once in the television coverage. An ex-serviceman was asked by a reporter,
"What about the Burmese?" And he replied that they had vanished when the Japanese invaded. In fact, more than 100,000 Burmese and other Asian prisoners also died building the Death Railway. If the British Army in Burma was a forgotten army, then the people over whose land it fought were invisible victims. And that remains true today as history repeats itself.
This is the regime's great secret, an extension of the Death Railway linking the towns of Ye and Tavoy. Once again, it's being built with slave labour in an area where foreigners are banned. Under the noses of the guards, we filmed it for the first time. It has been estimated that more than 200,000 people have been forced to build this railway, of whom up to 300 have been killed or have died from disease and exhaustion. The democracy movement have tried to video evidence of this, sometimes with tragic results. A report by the American State Department says the Burmese regime routinely uses forced labour and that this railway will transport soldiers and supplies into the area where $1 billion gas pipeline is being built for the regime by the French oil company Total, which is part owned by the French government, and the American company Unocal. The children here are being forced to work in temperatures of 35 degrees centigrade. They carry heavy loads of clay on their heads. This girl fell back exhausted, holding a disjointed shoulder. This boy is 10 years old. He has this job because he is small enough to fit in the hole directly beneath the grinder. But as we discovered, it's highly dangerous work. The children are forced to make bricks for the army, who then sell them back to the railway construction company. This load of clay, as heavy as wet cement, almost buried the boy. We stopped filming and quickly pulled him free. The other children would not have had the strength to save him. How many, we wondered, die like this?